just as a token of thank you for giving me this opportunity to come here and be part of this great event. As far as I was reading about it, it's actually as old as I am, so congratulations on this continuous effort by the organizers, and hopefully it continues this way. The discussion is in front of you, and the topic that inshallah we'll be discussing in the brief time that I have is defending our Prophet. We see that these are the 5 points that we will be inshallah focusing on. Hopefully I'll get through all of them as quickly as possible. And there are something which is raised both internally and externally, which I mean amongst the Muslims and outside of Muslim world, that Prophet commits sins, which also eventually leads to the fallibility of Rasulullah, that Prophet forget laws and make mistakes, which again makes him just like you and I. The marriages of the Rasulullah that took place, which are all documented in the history, the combativeness of Rasulullah, the wars that he took, ventured into. And lastly, why didn't Prophet eradicate slavery? When we look at the first topic, did Prophet commit sins? There's a verse in Quran, Surah Fath, verse number 1 and 2, which says, "Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina, liyaghfira laka Allahu ma taqaddama min dhanbika wa ma ta'akhkhar." That indeed we have inaugurated for you a very clear victory, that Allah may forgive you what is in the past of your sins and what is to come. When people read this ayah or ayat of this sort, right away the concept of dhanb or sin is associated with Rasulullah. Doubt is created over here is that Prophet committed sins before and after this verse was revealed, and Allah forgave his sins, and from the past and from the future. Fakhruddin Razi, in his tafsir and in actually the book called Ismatul Anbiya, writes the verse explicitly talks about forgiving due to the word maghfirat. And the word maghfirat is true when there has been a mistake or a sin, for maghfurun lah, the one who committed it. Sayyid Murtala, one of our scholars, speaks in this regard. He says this verse, the word dhanb over here, which is used, is in the form of masdar, which is root. Those of you who have a little bit of Arabic grammar, understanding of Arabic grammar, is used in masdar form, which according to Arabic grammar can be genitive, which means mudaf, towards both its subject and the object. Here, dhanb is genitive towards this object and not the subject, which means things which people of Makkah consider sins for Rasulullah and didn't let him enter into Makkah and did not let him enter into Masjidul Haram. Here, forgiveness means that we removed those ahkam imposed by these kuffar or these unbelievers and mushrikeen. Otherwise, what does that have to do with the Fath Mubin or Fathan Mubina, the victory that is being discussed in this particular ayah? That we forgive your sins and we gave you this victory. There has to be some relationship with that. Fakhruddin Razi adds, dhanb here also could be referred towards Prophet's sins before Nabuwwat. So after Nabuwwat, he was okay, but before Nabuwwat, for example. And also he goes to the extent by saying, if it's not taken as a sin, at least tarke awla, that he preferred the least favorable, which is also considered sin for Anbiya. So we see in this regards, we have various views. Allama Tabatabai, in this regards, he writes that in regards to Rasulullah, our scholars disapprove even tarke awla as mentioned by Allama Tabatabai. Generally, the word dhanb means disobedience against the command of Mawla, which entails punishment, and maghfirat is lifting the punishment on the disobedience, and therefore you're associating a crime of some sort with Rasul. Both of these words would tarnish the character of Rasulullah, therefore cannot be used for him. Kuffar consider Prophet's acts to be sinful, and that's why they would have never stopped harassing him after what he had done and brought about this revolution. So this victory, which started from Hudaybiyah and ended in conquest of Makkah, which is being mentioned over here, Inna fatahna laka fathan mubina, that we have given you this great victory, the relationship to that is what? It is that from now on, they will not be harassing you. The punishment that they were imposing upon you prior to you leaving Mecca and afterwards, after those wars that taken place, they will not be able to harm you. And that is what is being referred to as the dhanb of Rasulullah, not literally in the sense that Prophet Na'udhu Billah committed any sins. There are other explanations in this regard, but I know my time is very short. One hadith from our 8th Imam in this regards, Mamun asked, O son of Rasulullah, do you not consider all the prophets infallible? He said, yes, we do. He said, then what do you make of this verse of Quran? And he recited this ayat of Quran. Imam said, replying to him, this was the belief of mushrikeen of Makkah. Prophet called them towards Tawheed and fought with them with their idols, and they considered him to be a man of sins, or person who committed sins. So therefore, it is understandable that according to them, it was a sin what Prophet was doing, and not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, or associating any sins to Rasulullah. Second, if you look at the Prophet would forget things. This is also related to the previous one, because that also attacks the character of Rasulullah to the extent that he would forget things. There's an ayat of Quran in Surah An'am, I don't know if you can read this ayah, but it says, when you see those who gossip impiously about our signs, avoid them until they engage in some other discourse. But if shaitan makes you forget, then after remembering, do not sit with the wrongdoing lot. Doubt is created that this verse is explicitly mentioning that Prophet would forget things, especially in ahkam amali, in practice, and ahkam due to forgetfulness, and they were neglected by him. When this forgetfulness is proven for Rasulullah, then it would be easy to prove it for other Anbiya as well. Zamakhshari in Kashaf writes, if, O Prophet, you were deceived by the whisper of shaitan in regards to that which is forbidden, and you forgot our commands not to sit with such people, then remember afterwards that not to sit with these people anymore. He writes this and he emphasizes on it. Qurtubi says that this address is in particular to Rasulullah, emphasizing that there should not be any doubt that it is in regards to the shakhsiyat of Rasul, since forgetfulness is allowed for him, even for Anbiya. He narrates this from Ibn Arabi, and then he narrates a hadith from Sahihain to further prove his point by saying, Prophet said, قَالَ أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ أَنْسَ كَمَا تَنْسَوْنَا فَإِذَا نَسِيتُ فَاذْكُرُونِي. That I am a person like you, human being like you. I forget things, and like you forget things, when I forget, go ahead and remind me, give me a reminder. Qurtubi also adds on that those who say this is an address to Rasulullah, but in reality a hukum for the whole ummah, are actually trying to run away from associating forgetfulness with Rasulullah, where there's nothing wrong with associating forgetfulness with Rasulullah. Over here we see the stance of Fakhr Razi, another Sunni Mufassir, changes a little bit. In the previous argument he was on the other side, but in this argument he's on board with us. He says what? He said, this is not an address directly to Rasulullah. We must assume something in this sentence. إِذَا رَأَيْتَ أَيُّهَا السَّامِعَ الَّذِينَ يَخُوضُونَ فِي آيَاتِنَا. When you see, O listener of our commands, those who gossip impiously about our signs. So he said there must be something muqaddar in taqdeer, taken as something which is, assumption that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, إِذَا رَأَيْتَ يَا أَيُّهَا السَّامِعَ. When you see amongst the people, oh, the listener of this wahi, so it is an address in this way to Rasulullah. Then he says under the part, يُنْسِيَنَّكَ الشَّيْطَانِ, the shaitan will make you forget. He writes, يُفِيدُ أَنَّ التَّكْلِيفَ سَاقِطٌ عَنِ النَّاسِ. People would not be held accountable when they do an act out of forgetfulness. A lot of ahkam, I don't have time to go into details and give you examples. Many ahkam that we perform, if you forgetfully do something wrong, we will not be held accountable for that. So the same thing is being mentioned over here. From his word, we can understand that he's trying to associate a forgetfulness to the ummah rather than to Rasulullah. Although this address is to Rasulullah, but it clearly shows that the educational nature which is behind this address, and as many other ayat of Quran, and even this is the same way we see the du'as of our ma'asumeen, that when they associate things to themselves. For example, Dua Kumail, we read Amir al-Mu'mineen says what? He says, كُلُّ ذَنْبٍ أَذْنَبْتُهُ وَكُلُّ خَطِيَّةٍ أَخْطَأْتُهَا. That all the sins that I have committed and all the mistakes that I have made, Allah forgive all of those things. Right away it contradicts with the infallibility of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Therefore, this is an address to umum al-nas, the people, and not directly to Rasulullah. Third, we see the marriages of Rasulullah. This is a very hot topic. It's picked up, it's mentioned, it's addressed, and there are differences of opinions in this regards as well. Why did the Prophet enjoy more freedom in gratifying his physical needs than others? We read that in this regards also history tells us that Prophet remained married to one woman for first 25 years of his life until her death, and that is Bibi Khadija salamullahi alayha. And then only after her death at the age of 52, Prophet remarried. And there were different reasons for his marriages. They were not to fulfill his carnal desires at the age of 52. Rather, there were political reasons, giving shelter to widows, people's inclinations to establish a relationship with Rasulullah, and so on and so forth. The above question can be answered in several parts, which are as follows. I've mentioned over here. First, do all of those cases which have been pointed in verse number 50 of Surah Ahzab concern the Prophet exclusively? What is that ayah? That ayah says, O Prophet, we have made lawful to you your wives, whom you have given their dowries, and those whom your right hand owns, of those whom Allah gave you as spoils of war, and the daughters of your paternal uncle, daughters of your paternal aunts, your maternal uncle and your maternal aunts who migrated with you, and a faithful woman if she offers herself to the Prophet and the Prophet desires to take her in marriage, a privilege exclusively for you, not for the rest of the faithful. This is Surah Ahzab, verse number 50. We see in this ayah, whoever has little bit of knowledge of our ahkam and sharia knows that the women listed in this ayah are halal for everyone, for marriage purpose. Anyone can marry all of these women. You go ahead and read this ayah, all of these are not exclusively for Rasulullah, except that last which says, the one who desires to take, offers herself into marriage to you, you would not have to pay her dowry. That is the exclusive one that has been mentioned in regards to Rasulullah. We have made lawful to you does not imply exclusivity. Rather, there are also other verses which are addressed to Rasulullah, but in the injunctions in those verses include all of the Muslims alike, except that last point which is mentioned here. Why was this special kind of marriage in particular to Rasulullah allowed? Well, it's not allowed to others, so this is a question which is genuine, yes. The only case which is particular to Rasulullah is where a woman gives or dedicates herself to the Apostle of Allah voluntarily and with her own consent. Even that is allowed for someone over here if wants to, come into marriage with all the conditions fulfilled. You can also have that for, other human beings as well. But they'll have to pay dowry. This is the only case where Rasulullah is istisna, his exception, that he would not have to pay dowry, whereas others would have to. Secondly, some mufassirin of the Holy Quran, they said in this view, that Prophet never benefited from this exclusive right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to him, so do not even bother discussing it. Third, why did Prophet enjoy special privileges as far as the fulfilling of his carnal desires compared to other men? As for why men in general can choose up to 4 wives while there's no such restriction for Rasulullah. That is also a case which is raised by non-Muslims, especially trying to tarnish the character of Rasulullah, because as soon as you associate marriages with someone and divorces with someone, right away, who would want to go ahead and give their daughter into marriage of a person who's been divorcing? So right away, you're trying to attack the character of Rasulullah from that aspect. We see the privileges given to Prophet are for the obligations which have been put exclusively onto him. This is why we see that Prophet has been given a privilege in one case. In another case, he has been obligated to do certain acts of worship, such as tahajjud prayers. You and I, it's only recommended for us to perform this tahajjud, whereas it is wajib for our Prophet. But Holy Prophet would have to do it. There will be punishment, if he neglected it for that matter. Some believe that since the Holy Prophet was at the peak of irfan, at the highest level of the Gnostic relations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and on one hand, he was bound to live a normal life with ordinary people, therefore he needed some adjusting medium, means of which associating with the wives was considered to be one of them. Lastly, according to Shia, apart from the Holy Prophet, other men also not faced with any of these constraints about the number of the wives they can have. However, keeping in mind the concept of justice and adalat must be fulfilled. For example, Surah Nisa, verse number 3 that you read, it says what? وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً. That if you can fulfill the concept of justice amongst them, then it's okay for you as well. But at another place in Quran, Allah says, لَن تَسْتَطِيعُوا, you will never be able to fulfill this concept of justice. Therefore, فَوَاحِدَةً, make sure that it is only one. And that's what is being implied over here. And I mentioned the reasons behind the marriages of Rasulullah were some of them political reasons. Prophet married into, when he married someone, he basically brought the whole tribe into the realm of Islam. When he married someone, these were some of the reasons why some of those marriages took place, and many reasons were these widows that Prophet was marrying just to provide shelters. Quran considers them, what happened to this? Okay. So, in spite of all of these privileges, we see that the person of Holy Prophet, why were these wives deprived of some of these rights that ordinary women would enjoy? Quran considers them different once they are married to Rasulullah. That is another question which is raised in regards to how Quran treats these women. Surah Ahzab says, O wives of the Prophet, whoever of you commits a gross indecency, her punishment shall be doubled. Second, it says, O wives of the Prophet, you're not like other women. Right away, how much more explicit could it be that you're not like ordinary women? You're different. Your status becomes different when you're married to Rasulullah. Stay in your houses and do not flaunt your finery like the former days of pagan and ignorance. Although the limitations and restrictions applied to Rasulullah's wives were associated with their status, yet they were not forced to live with Rasulullah in this way. In fact, Quran in Surah Ahzab, verse number 28, mentions this saying, Prophet, say to your wives, if you desire a life of the world and its glitter, come, I will provide for you and release you in a graceful manner. And if they were to leave, obviously, those restrictions will not be upon them. But then it says, but if you desire Allah and His apostle and the abode of the hereafter, then Allah has indeed prepared a great reward for the virtuous ones amongst you. Naturally, if they were to choose option one, as I said, they will be free to do whatever they want to. But obviously we know that they chose option number 2. Lastly, in this regards is, did Prophet marry a 6-year-old girl? Most of these narrations that have been printed, I'll skip because this is a longer discussion, so I'll mention only 3 evidences that he did not marry a 6-year-old girl. First of all of these references lead to only one person in the Sunni text. And his integrity, Hisham's integrity, Ibn Urwa's integrity is also challenged. But according to Tabari, when we look at, I don't know if I have the slides for it or not. Okay, yes, evidence 1 is the reliability of the source. I'll skip that reliability. But chronology, if you look at the pertinent dates in the history of Islam, it will help you understand, as I will be mentioning, a lot of numbers. First revelation, 610. Abu Bakr accepts Islam, 610. Public preaching, 613. Emigration to, Abyssinia, 615. Generally accepted, engagement of Aisha, 620. Hijrah is 622. And generally accepted year of Aisha's living with Rasulullah is 623, which is first or second year after Hijrah. We see that according to Tabari, also according to Hisham ibn Urwa, Ibn Hanbal and Ibn Sa'ad, Aisha was engaged at 7 years of age and began to cohabit with Rasulullah at the age of 9. However, in another work, Tabari says all 4 of Abu Bakr's daughters and children rather were born of his 2 wives in the pre-Islamic period. So here one narration by Tabari is mentioning that she married at that, she was born, according to that, if he says she was married to Rasulullah at the age of 6 and then started living at 9, that would bring her date of birth or the year of birth only if she married, started living with Rasulullah in the 2nd year of Hijrah, she would be in 613. So over here 613, public preaching. So 3 years after the beginning of revelation. And yet another place, Tabari says that Aisha was born in the pre-Islamic time, in Jahiliyyah. If you were born in the pre-Islamic time, 610, she should be at least 14 years old. So Tabari himself is contradicting. Next we see the age of Aisha in relation to the age of Hazrat Fatima. See that Ibn Hajar mentions that Fatima was born 5 years before the Bi'sat. There's some narrations 5 years before the Bi'sat, some are 5 years after. But we'll take this one, that she was born 5 years before the Bi'sat of Rasulullah. So Prophet was 35 years old. And they say that Aisha was 5 years younger than Bibi Fatima. So based on this, Ibn Hajar, Fatima was born when Prophet was 35, and Aisha was 5 years younger to Fatima. Ibn Hajar's statement is factual. If it is factual, Aisha was born when Prophet was 40 years old. So if he was married to Prophet, if she was married to Prophet when he was 50 years old, Aisha's age at the time of marriage would be 12. So Ibn Hajar, Tabari, Ibn Hisham, and Ibn Hanbal contradict each other. So the marriage of Aisha was not at the age of 7. Last evidence, age of Aisha in relation to the age of Asma, her sister. According to Abdul Rahman, and this is Zahabi narrates this, that Asma was 10 years older than Aisha. She was 10 years older than Aisha. According to Ibn Kathir, Asma was elder to her sister Aisha by 10 years. According to Ibn Kathir again, Asma saw the killing of her son during that year of 73 after Hijrah. And this is the year of her death. She was 100 at that time. So if she was 100 in the 73rd year after Hijrah, that means when she was born, it was 27 years prior to the Bi'sat of Rasulullah. Aisha becomes 10 years younger than her, so she has to be at least 17 years old prior to the first revelation, or at the time of her marriage to Rasulullah. So all of these narrations mentioning 6 or 7 or 9, they all contradict themselves. And there are other evidences as well, but unfortunately I've been already shown my sign to leave. So I'll skip other evidences and I'll go through these two very quickly. The combativeness of Rasulullah. Why did Prophet fight in so many battles? Well, I'm not going to go in the concept of jihad, major and minor struggle. Does Quran state kill all the infidels? فَقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَيْثُ وَجَدْتُمُوهُمْ وَخُذُوهُمْ وَاحْصُرُوهُمْ وَقْعُدُوا لَهُمْ كُلَّ مَرْصَدٍ. Kill the polytheists. Wherever you find them, capture them, besiege them, lie in wait for them at every ambush. Yes, the ayat of Quran is there, and many other verses of such case is there. But this happens when you take things out of context or mention partially. Someone says, why don't you pray? Quran says, La taqrabu salat. No, mention the whole ayah. Wa antum sukara, when you are intoxicated. Someone says, why don't you pray for the deceased, or why don't you stand on the qabr? Quran says in Surah Tawbah, Wala tusalli ala hadim minhum mata abadan, wala taqum ala qabrihi. Do not pray for those who have died, and do not stand on their qubur. This is the ayat of Surah Tawbah. But when you finish the whole ayah, you'll understand that who it is referring to. Innahum kafaru billahi. These are the kuffar. Don't stand on their qubur and pray for them. Why would you want to pray for the kuffar and the unbelievers? So when you replace the word kuffar with mu'mineen, no, stand on their qabr. Make dua for them. There's nothing wrong in this regard. Similar is the case when you read this ayat from Surah Tawbah, verse number 5, فَقْتُلُوا مُشْرِكِينَ. Kill the polytheists. When you read the whole ayat, you will understand. It says, bearing our exception are the polytheists with whom you have made a covenant, a treaty. So there's a treaty between kuffar and Muslimin. Because they ambushed and they broke and breached the document, only then Islam, remember, it's at a very fragile state. Initially Islam, these people who have converted, they've migrated to Medina, they're not really well off. So as is, whatever they possess is very dear to them. And if that is taken away from them, then there will nothing be left. At this point, Islam says, go ahead, go after them, take back whatever belongs to you, run after them, kill them, slay them, so on and so forth. But later on, when Islam is much stronger, you hear such statements, even from obviously from Rasulullah and from other people as well, that, al-affu amman zalamaka, forgive the one who has done wrong to you. Forgive the one who has done wrong to you, and so on and so forth. So this was in the initial days of Islam, where Islam was struggling and it was at a very frail state. I have run out of my time, but I have not run out of my discussion. Last, I just wanted to very quickly, I'll take 30 seconds of the time to finish this off, and I get to recite this testimony by Michael, but that's okay. Why didn't Prophet eradicate slavery? Slavery was common in the time of Rasulullah. Why didn't Prophet put an end to it? Well, Even the same way, this wajib and haram did not all become wajib all at once. The wajibat were gradually introduced and muharramat were gradually introduced. Similarly, slavery was something which was prevalent at that time, and therefore it took time for Islam to eradicate this. We see there was a means that was mentioned, which is kafara, that for the expiation of breaking an oath. When you break an oath, right away, there's first atonement is what? Free a slave. Islam is working towards freeing. When you break an oath, tahriru raqaba, you go out and free a slave. When you renounce the wives by calling them mothers, tahriru raqaba, you go out and free the slave. And if one breaks a fast intentionally, the first kafara is what? Tahriru raqaba. So in this way, Islam was working towards eradicating the slavery, and this is just a bogus argument that has been held against Rasulullah. Unfortunately, I had to run through all of these things. There wasn't enough time. But hopefully in the questions and answers, I will be able to maybe address some of these things in more details. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.